Mom, starting tomorrow, these are your new responsibilities within this household. Ranata's pronouncement resonated in my mind as I scanned the document she had just placed in my hand. It was not a proposal, it was not a request, it was a decree. My own daughter, in my very own home, was assigning me a work roster as though I were a recently engaged domestic helper. If you do not concur, she continued, her voice chilling, a tone she had meticulously honed over the preceding months, you may gather your belongings and depart. This residence requires someone who genuinely contributes, not merely occupies space. My hands trembled as I examined the compiled list. 6 in the morning, awaken and prepare the morning meal. 7, assist the children with their attire and escort them to school. 8, commence general house cleaning. 9, launder and hang the day's washing. 10, prepare the midday repast. The roster continued, hour by hour, until 11 in the evening, at which point, according to this directive, I was expected to be pressing garments for the subsequent day. And naturally, Gustavo added from his perch on the sofa, his gaze not once deviating from his mobile device. All of this includes covering the household expenses. That is precisely what your pension is intended for. No. I stood frozen in the center of my own living space, the very same room where I had cradled Renata at her birth, 34 years prior, where I had joyfully commemorated her birthdays, where I had soothed her through the pangs of her initial heartbreaks. Now, that same child regarded me with an iciness that pierced me to my very core. You do not have an abundance of time to deliberate, mother, she stated, meticulously applying a vibrant shade of pink polish to her fingernails. Gustavo has already consulted with legal counsel. Given that we have resided here for over 2 years and maintained the property, we possess certain rights. Therefore, you may elect to be our employee and remain, or you may leave, and we shall stay regardless. The threat was unmistakable. In my own abode, with the deed bearing my name, my daughter was holding me captive. Either I would transform into her personal attendant, shouldering all financial burdens and toiling ceaselessly, or I would be expelled, allowing them to claim everything. Contemplate it, Ranata continued, gently blowing on her freshly painted nails. At your age, where else could you possibly secure lodging on a $600 monthly pension? At the very least, here you have a roof over your head and sustenance, and you can see your grandchildren daily, unless of course you would rather exist in solitary confinement in some regrettable, cramped room. Gustavo emitted a harsh chuckle. Furthermore, my dear, let us be practical. What else do you envision doing with your life? At least this way you will feel a sense of purpose. It is preferable to merely watching television all day, as ladies of your age are prone to do. My grandchildren were on the floor, engrossed in their electronic tablets, entirely oblivious to the conversation that was irrevocably dismantling my world. 8-year-old Ethan glanced up at me momentarily and inquired, Grandma, are you going to make snacks? I'm hungry. It was a moment of most brutal normalcy. To them, I had already been reduced to the status of housekeeper, the individual who mends, cleans, prepares meals, and serves. Not the grandmother who adored them, not the woman who had dedicated 40 years of her life to acquiring this very house. I was merely the gratuitous staff, perpetually at their disposal. Observe, mother. Ranata rose and approached me, placing a patronizing hand upon my shoulder. It is not that we do not cherish you. We hold you in high esteem. That is precisely why we are extending this opportunity for you to remain. However, circumstances necessitate a transformation. This household requires structure, and an individual must assume accountability for ensuring its seamless operation. And why must that individual be me? I managed to whisper, finding my voice for the first time in this nightmarish discourse. Because you are the one who is not gainfully employed, Gustavo responded, his eyes still fixed on his device. We engage in work, we pursue education, we shoulder genuine responsibilities. You simply collect your pension and contribute nothing of tangible value. I felt as if I had been physically struck. 40 years labouring as a secretary in a government institution. 40 years rising at 5 in the morning, enduring 2 bus journeys to reach my workplace, meticulously saving every cent to acquire this residence. 40 years raising Renata alone after her father absconded when she was a mere 3 years old. Contribute nothing of tangible value, I repeated, the words catching in my throat. All these years maintaining this dwelling, settling the bills, procuring your provisions, tending to your offspring while you indulge in leisure, laundering your garments, rectifying your disarray. That is not labour, mother. Ranata interrupted me with that condescending smirk I had come to despise. That is simply what anyone residing in a dwelling does. The distinction is that henceforth it will be formalized with set schedules to ensure optimal efficiency. I surveyed my living room. The furnishings, acquired through immense sacrifice, were now in a state of disrepair. The leather sofa, for which I had diligently paid over 2 years, bore indelible food stains and tears from the children's uninhibited jumping, unchecked by any authority. The polished wooden coffee table, once my source of pride, was marred by numerous rings from glasses and hot receptacles, victims of a complete disregard for coasters. My cherished family photographs adorning the walls had been supplanted by cinematic posters favoured by Gustavo. My extensive collection of literary works had been unceremoniously relegated to a cardboard receptacle in the garage to accommodate the video games and electronic gadgets they incessantly procured with funds I provided. Moreover, Ranata continued, meticulously examining her nails with an air of profound satisfaction, this will prove beneficial for you. It will imbue your existence with a sense of purpose. Lately you have appeared rather despondent, quite listless. Having clearly defined duties will contribute to an improved self-perception. The manipulation was so palpable it inflicted physical discomfort. She was peddling my own subjugation as if it were a benevolent gesture, as if assuming the role of their unpaid domestic staff constituted a form of therapeutic intervention for my emotional well-being. And you will be required to work on weekends as well, Gustavo added, finally lifting his gaze from his electronic device. Saturdays are designated for a thorough house cleaning, and Sundays are for the preparation of the week's meals. It is not our intention to be unkind to you, my dear. It is simply that we require the household to function as a genuine family unit. As a genuine family unit, I echoed inwardly, a surge of anger beginning to supplant the initial shock. This is not a genuine family unit. This is the house I purchased, the house I meticulously maintained, the house where I welcomed you when you had nowhere else to turn. Yes, but now we constitute a family, Ranata rejoined, employing that convoluted logic that left me utterly speechless. And within a family, each member fulfills a specific role. Ours is to labour and generate income. Yours is to maintain the household. It is a matter of equitable distribution. Valerie, my granddaughter, who had recently turned 6 years of age, approached and gently tugged at the hem of my skirt. Grandma, may I have some cookies? The ones on top of the refrigerator? I looked into her eyes and perceived therein the identical anticipation I had observed in her mother's gaze when she was of a similar age. The expectation that Grandma would invariably acquiesce, would invariably rectify any predicament, would invariably be readily accessible. However, this time, that expectation was accompanied by a formal schedule, an unendorsed contract, and an implicit threat. In a moment, my darling, I assured her, tenderly stroking her hair. No, Ranata interjected sharply. Valerie, your grandmother will be adhering to a new schedule. If you desire something, you must request it at the appropriate juncture. It is presently 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and according to the schedule, this is her designated time for preparing snacks. I walked towards the kitchen, my legs feeling unsteady, as if each step propelled me deeper into an abyss from which escape seemed increasingly improbable. The schedule remained clutched in my hand, its edges softened by the pressure of my fingers. It felt akin to holding my own death warrant, emotionally speaking. Upon opening the pantry door, I was confronted by its stark emptiness. 3 fractured cookies resided at the bottom of a package, an expired can of tuna, and half a bag of rice. The refrigerator presented a similarly desolate scene. 2 yogurts Renata had acquired for her personal consumption, a single beer belonging to Gustavo, and the remnants of a dinner from 3 days prior that no one else had evinced any desire to consume. "Grandma, there are no cookies!" Valerie's voice, tinged with the impatience she had inherited from her mother, echoed from the living room. "I am coming, my darling," I replied, fully cognizant that I would need to improvise with the meagre provisions available, or more accurately, with the paltry amount they had left me to possess in my own culinary space. I detected the approaching footsteps of Renata. The rhythmic click of her heels reverberated with an authority previously uncharacteristic in this dwelling. It was as if the mere act of handing me that document had irrevocably transformed her into the de facto proprietor of all. "Mother, while you are attending to the kitchen, I wish to remind you that you must visit the supermarket early tomorrow. I have compiled a comprehensive list of all our requisites," she announced, affixing a piece of paper to the refrigerator door. "The estimated cost for groceries amounts to approximately $150. Oh, and you must also make a stop at the pharmacy to retrieve the children's vitamins and Gustavo's specialized shampoo. $150, a quarter of my monthly pension, allocated for a week's worth of provisions for a family that had unilaterally declared my financial resources to be their rightful entitlement. Renata, my pension does not perpetually stretch to accommodate such weekly expenditures," I managed to articulate, though my voice sounded remarkably diminished within my own kitchen. "Oh, mother, always the same refrain," she sighed with exaggerated drama. "You're aware, Gustavo is diligently saving to acquire our own residence. We cannot be expending our income on sustenance and fundamental necessities. Moreover, you partake of meals here daily. It is only logical that you contribute to the household expenditures." The reasoning was so distorted it induced a sensation of vertigo. Gustavo was accumulating funds for his own abode while residing rent-free in mine. He consumed my provisions and availed himself of my services, and I, the rightful proprietor of this property, was expected to subsidize the privilege of functioning as their unpaid domestic laborer. "And what if I lack sufficient funds?" I inquired, though I already anticipated her response. "Then you will need to exercise fiscal prudence and prioritize the acquisition of basic necessities. The children require proper nourishment. Mother, you cannot adopt a selfish stance regarding finances when young ones are present in the household." Selfish with my own money in my own house. The word struck me like a shard of glass embedded in my chest. Gustavo materialized at the kitchen threshold, stretching languidly as if he had just emerged from a deep slumber. It was precisely 4:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and he was clad in his sleepwear, observing the television while I was attending to all other domestic affairs. "My dear, could you prepare something substantial for our evening repast?" It was an exceptionally demanding day at work, he stated, opening the refrigerator and extracting a beer with an air of absolute normalcy. "A demanding day?" I could not refrain from posing the question. I was under the impression you had not departed the premises at all this morning. I work remotely on Tuesdays, he replied, his tone clearly indicating that I lacked any prerogative to question his personal schedule. Virtual conferences, crucial phone calls, it is exceedingly taxing. Consequently, I require a period of relaxation once my professional obligations have concluded. I glanced at the clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. If he had indeed been working from his home office, his professional day had encompassed a mere 3 hours, considering I had observed him slumbering on the sofa at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Furthermore, he continued, taking a protracted draught from his beer, Renata and I have been discussing certain supplementary regulations to enhance the overall efficiency of the household's operations. For instance, it is imperative that you respect our periods of repose. When we are engaged in viewing television in the living area, it would be most conducive if you refrained from introducing any disruptions through cleaning or culinary activities. But the schedule dictates that I must prepare meals at this precise time, I countered, holding up the paper still in my grasp. Yes, but with minimal auditory disturbance. Alternatively, you could commence your culinary preparations at an earlier hour when we are not in a state of repose. It is fundamentally a matter of optimizing organizational protocols. The inherent contradiction was preposterous. I was mandated to prepare meals at predetermined intervals, yet simultaneously enjoined from disturbing their periods of leisure, which, by all appearances, constituted the majority of their day. I was expected to adhere to stringent directives that were subject to their capricious alterations. Renata reappeared in the kitchen, a smile gracing her lips, though it failed to reach her eyes. It was that particular expression she had perfected since her adolescent years, the one she employed when seeking a favor or when preparing to deliver a particularly cutting remark, cloaked in the guise of solicitous concern. "Mother, I also wish to discuss the matter of your personal quarters," she remarked, leaning against the countertop as if she held undisputed ownership of the entire establishment. "Gustavo and I are of the opinion that it would be more advantageous if you were to relocate to the more compact chamber situated at the rear of the residence. We require the master bedroom due to its greater spatial dimensions and our ever-expanding collection of possessions." The master bedroom. My master bedroom. The very room where I had resided for 3 decades, where I had wept in the aftermath of my husband's passing, where I had harbored dreams of witnessing my grandchildren flourish in an environment replete with affection. Now, they intended to relegate me to the minuscule service room, quite literally. "That particular chamber is exceedingly confined, Renata," I articulated, feeling my voice falter. "There is barely sufficient space to accommodate a twin-sized bed." "It is ideal for you, Mother. You do not require an extensive amount of space in any case, and in doing so, we will gain a more capacious closet for our attire and the children's accoutrements. It presents a more practical arrangement for all involved." More practical for all involved. That was the ceaseless refrain that served as justification for every indignity, every erosion of my dignity, every incremental step towards my transformation into a mere spectre within the confines of my own existence. "Furthermore," Gustavo added, his tone laced with an uncharacteristic helpfulness, "the smaller chamber is situated in closer proximity to the kitchen. It will prove more convenient for you to arise at an early hour to prepare breakfast without causing any disturbance to others." Naturally, my designated living space within the household had been strategically determined to maximize my utility as a domestic operative, situated near the culinary facilities for enhanced service, yet removed from the primary communal areas to avoid inconveniencing the actual inhabitants of the residence. "And when precisely am I expected to effectuate this relocation?" I inquired, though I already recognized the inherent lack of any genuine alternative. This weekend would be the most opportune moment, Renata replied with effervescent cheerfulness, as if we were engaged in the planning of a leisurely vacation. Gustavo will be amenable to assisting you with the relocation of any weighty items. Well, the few possessions you deem essential to transport. The majority of the furnishings presently adorning the master bedroom are slated for our personal use. The furniture I had painstakingly acquired, the sturdy wooden dresser, which had represented my inaugural significant purchase, following the attainment of my initial employment, the ornate vanity, complete with its reflective surface, before which I had meticulously prepared myself for my wedding day, the marital bed where I had conceived Ranata, all of it now destined to become their property, purportedly due to its enhanced practicality. Ethan darted into the kitchen, his electronic tablet clutched in his hand, his expression one of urgent necessity. "Grandma, my battery has depleted and I require the charging cable. Where might it be located?" "In my room, my dear. Please retrieve it," I responded instinctively. "No," Ranata interjected with unyielding firmness. "Ethan, you are not to enter your grandmother's private chamber without explicit permission. She will deliver the charging cable to you once she has concluded the preparation of the afternoon snack." The humiliation was now absolute. Henceforth, not even my own grandson was granted unrestricted access to my personal sleeping quarters. Yet, Renata and Gustavo retained the authority to dictate the timing and manner of my relocation, the furnishings I was permitted to retain, and the specific room within which I was permitted to reside. "And one further point, Mother," Ranata continued, as if presenting an unending enumeration of new restrictions. "Sundays are designated as our family day. Gustavo and I wish to dedicate quality time to the children. Therefore, it would be most advisable if you were to make arrangements for your absence on those particular days. You are welcome to visit a park, attend to a social engagement with a friend, or pursue any other activity that appeals to you. Our primary requirement is that we have ample space to engage in familial pursuits. Sundays, my family day, the day I had, for years, reserved for engaging in special activities with my grandchildren, for collaborative culinary endeavors, for shared movie viewings nestled comfortably on the sofa. Now it was the day I was to be rendered an unwelcome interloper in my own domicile. And where, precisely, am I expected to go each Sunday?" I inquired, feeling the unwelcome prickle of tears welling in my eyes. "I am uncertain, Mother. Surely you possess acquaintances. You could embark on a leisurely stroll, perhaps attend a place of worship. There are numerous pursuits appropriate for individuals of your age. The paramount consideration is that you cultivate your own independent activities, thereby diminishing your reliance upon us for entertainment." That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in my bed, my gaze fixed upon the ceiling, which in the not too distant future would no longer be mine, contemplating the trajectory that had led me to this present juncture. At what precise moment had my maternal role transmuted into that of a domestic servant? When had I relinquished my right to voice an opinion within the confines of my own dwelling? I recalled the arrival of Renata, accompanied by Gustavo and their offspring. 2 years prior, they had faced eviction from their rented apartment owing to Gustavo's termination from his preceding employment. They arrived with tears streaming down their faces, embracing me and offering assurances that their stay would be of a provisional nature, lasting merely a few months until their financial circumstances stabilized. "You are our salvation, Mother," Ranata had declared on that initial evening. "I cannot fathom what we would do without you. You are, without question, the most exceptional mother in the entire world." The initial weeks had been characterized by an almost idyllic harmony. It was an unparalleled joy to have the house once again brimming with vitality. to hear the jubilant laughter of the children echoing through hallways that had remained in somber silence since my husband's passing. Ranita had willingly assisted with the preparation of meals. Gustavo had undertaken minor repairs, and the little ones had filled my heart with their uninhibited and affectionate embraces. However, gradually, so imperceptibly, that I failed to recognize the shift until it was irrevocably too late, the dynamics began to undergo a subtle alteration. Initially, it was Renata, requesting that I supervise the children while she embarked on her job-seeking endeavors. Subsequently, it became Gustavo's expectation that I would prepare dinner, citing his exhaustion from an arduous day of job interviews. Eventually, it evolved into a routine for me to shoulder the cost of groceries, with the rationale being that after all, we all partake of sustenance within this establishment. Each favor I extended metamorphosed into an unspoken expectation. Every gesture of affection transmuted into an assumed obligation. On each occasion that I uttered the reassuring phrase, "No problem," in response to a request, I was, in essence, inadvertently endorsing my own emotional subjugation. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I detected faint sounds emanating from the kitchen. Silently, I disengaged myself from my slumber and proceeded down the hallway, only to discover Gustavo helping himself to cereal directly from the carton, inadvertently scattering a trail of crumbs across the countertop, a surface I had meticulously cleaned prior to retiring for the night. "Gustavo, is everything satisfactory?" I whispered, endeavoring to avoid awakening the slumbering children. He regarded me with an expression of startled surprise, as if he had been apprehended in the act of some transgression. "Yes, I was merely feeling a bit peckish. It amounts to nothing. However, tomorrow the cereal will be served in a bowl for the children," I stated, observing the near-empty state of the carton. "Oh, my dear, do not engage in dramatics. It is merely cereal. You are perfectly capable of procuring more tomorrow," he retorted, absconding with the depleted carton and making his way back to his sleeping quarters. My sleeping quarters. I remained stationary in the dimness, diligently clearing the scattered remnants he had left behind, the stark realization dawning upon me that this was now my imposed reality. Silently rectifying their disarray at 3 in the morning, while he slumbered soundly in my bed, exhibiting not the slightest concern for the repercussions of his actions. On Friday morning, as I commenced the preparation of breakfast, in strict accordance with my newly instituted official schedule, Renata descended the staircase, her demeanor exuding an energy I had not witnessed in her for many months. She was attired in a crimson dress, unfamiliar to me, and shod in footwear that presumably cost more than my entire week's allocation for groceries. "Mother, I require your assistance in supervising the children throughout the entire weekend," she announced, her voice carrying an air of nonchalant command as she proceeded to pour coffee into my cherished mug, the one adorned with delicate painted floral motifs, a treasured gift from my husband on our 5th wedding anniversary. "Gustavo and I are embarking on a couple's retreat at the downtown hotel. It is imperative that we reconnect following this period of considerable stress." "A couple's retreat?" I repeated inwardly, unable to entirely suppress my astonishment. "And with what financial resources are you undertaking this excursion?" "Oh, mother, always preoccupied with pecuniary matters," she replied with a manufactured laugh she had artfully perfected. "Gustavo received a bonus at his place of employment. We are most deserving of a respite after navigating such trying circumstances." A bonus? Gustavo, whose daily professional commitment amounted to a mere 3 hours of remote work, had received a financial bonus. Yet somehow those additional funds proved insufficient to procure cereal or to contribute meaningfully towards the household's expenditures. The sum was deemed adequate solely for opulent accommodations and romantic escapades. And will the children be adequately attended to by me for the entirety of the weekend? I inquired, though I was already acutely aware that my personal opinion held negligible weight in this matter. Naturally, they will be. You are their grandmother. It is entirely within the natural order of things for you to assume responsibility for their care. Furthermore, according to your new timetable, weekends are specifically designated for engaging in activities with them, she stated, her attention intermittently shifting to her mobile device as she spoke. It was an undeniable truth. Within the framework of my servitude schedule, weekends were explicitly marked as periods allocated for intensive childcare and a comprehensive deep cleaning of the residence. Apparently, the concept of personal respite held no place within their meticulously devised organizational structure for family life. Ranata, we must engage in a dialogue, I asserted, feeling an internal shift, as if a crucial component within me were fracturing. This situation is no longer tenable. She raised her gaze from her electronic device, an expression of genuine bewilderment etched upon her features, as if incapable of comprehending my burgeoning protest against what she perceived as my evidently predetermined and unassailable destiny. Dialogue concerning what, mother? Your recent predisposition towards negativity? For I have indeed observed a marked increase in your grumbling. Perhaps you should consult a medical professional at your advanced age. It is quite common to experience hormonal fluctuations that adversely impact one's disposition. Hormonal fluctuations. My growing indignation at the flagrant mistreatment was being pathologized as a medical ailment requiring resolution. My resistance to the pervasive humiliation was being reclassified as a symptom of my advanced years, necessitating professional intervention. I am not unwell, Renata. I am simply weary of being subjected to treatment akin to that of an employee within my own residence, I stated, surprisingly to myself, with a newfound clarity. An employee? She repeated, adopting an air of feigned offense that would have undoubtedly earned her an Academy Award. Mother, how could you possibly utter such a sentiment? You are a member of our family. What transpires is that within a family unit, each individual bears specific responsibilities. Our responsibilities are to engage in labor and generate financial resources. Your duty is to ensure the smooth operation of the household. It's that straightforward. And why are my obligations to cover all expenditures and work around the clock? I inquired, my voice wavering yet gaining resolve. Mother, no one compelled you to labor 24 hours. The timetable provided to you is quite sensible. You have allocated breaks between your duties. You are free to relax, enjoy television, or engage in any activity you desire during your leisure periods. I observed the schedule affixed to the refrigerator. The designated free periods were 30-minute intervals interspersed between tasks, sufficient for a restroom visit or a sip of water, but hardly enough for genuine recuperation. And the finances, why must I bear the cost of everything when you possess an income? I pressed. Because we are accumulating funds for our future, mother. We cannot disperse our resources on immediate needs when we have long-term aspirations. You have already lived your existence. You had your opportunity to save and plan. Now, it is our turn. The logic was profoundly cruel. By their rationale, I had already exhausted my chance at life, and my present role was to fund and facilitate their prospects. My retirement earnings, accrued over 40 years of labor, held less significance than their future ambitions. Gustavo materialized in the kitchen, already attired for his departure, a smile gracing his features that I found increasingly repulsive. He approached Ranada and bestowed a kiss upon her cheek, a gesture of ownership and shared understanding that entirely excluded me. Everything in order for the weekend? He queried her, completely disregarding my presence, though I stood no more than 3 feet away. Yes, my dearest, I have conveyed all details to Mother. She will manage the children and the household. Ranada responded, as though I were merely another possession she had arranged for their absence. Excellent, my darling. Just one more item, Gustavo added, finally directing his attention to me. On Monday, my mother is scheduled to visit for several days. She will require the guest chamber, so it would be prudent if you ensure it is immaculate. She also prefers an early breakfast. Around 6 in the morning, I trust this presents no inconvenience. His mother, another individual I would be obliged to attend to, provide sustenance for and serve within my own abode, another mouth to feed with my sustenance, another soul anticipating my services as if it were the most natural course of events. And for what duration will she be staying? I inquired, though I already suspected the answer would displease me. We are not precisely certain. It will depend on her disposition. Lately, she has been quite solitary since my father passed, so we thought companionship with family might prove beneficial, he replied, as if my residence were a complimentary guest house for those in need of company. Gustavo, your mother and I do not harmonize particularly well, I stated, recalling the scant occasions I had encountered her and her condescending demeanor towards me. Oh, my dear, those are bygone matters. You must endeavor to forgive and forget. Furthermore, she is an elderly lady. She requires care and attention. I am confident that as you become better acquainted with her, you will find yourselves quite compatible. Care and attention that, naturally, I would provide without compensation or acknowledgement, while Ranada and Gustavo indulged in their romantic sojourn. I would be serving breakfast at 6 in the morning to a woman who perceived me as inferior. And mother, Ranada interjected, adjusting the earrings that completed her ensemble. When your mother-in-law arrives, it would be advisable if you ceded her the master suite. We can occupy the children's quarters for a few days. She needs to be comfortable. The master suite, which had already been relinquished by me, was now to be bestowed upon Gustavo's mother. I, within my own dwelling, would inhabit the smallest chamber, while a complete stranger slept in my bed, utilized my furnishings, and expected my services. The weekend devolved into a torment that exceeded my most grim expectations. Ranada and Gustavo departed on Friday at 2 in the afternoon, having furnished me with an additional compendium of directives concerning childcare, encompassing precise meal timings, educational pursuits, restricted screen exposure, and stringent sleep protocols. It is imperative that you maintain discipline, mother, Ranada had impressed upon me prior to entering the taxi I had procured to transport them to the downtown hotel. Children require structure. If you indulge them this weekend, it will prove exceedingly arduous for them to show us respect thereafter. Ethan and Valerie regarded me with expectant gazes, anticipating my simultaneous fulfillment of the roles of entertainer, cook, educator, and caregiver. It was not their fault, of course. They were children adapting to a paradigm wherein their grandmother was the ultimate problem solver, while their parents revelled in liberties I had nearly forgotten existed. On Saturday morning, as I prepared pancakes for breakfast, in accordance with the precise nutritional guidance Ranada had detailed, Ethan inadvertently spilled orange juice upon the living room carpet. It was an ordinary mishap, the kind that transpires when children are present. However, as I commenced the cleaning process, I ascertained a deficiency in cleaning supplies. Grandma, mother says that when something stains, you must clean it immediately, or it will be irrevocably ruined, Valerie informed me with the gravity of a seasoned supervisor. She was accurate. Ranada had been remarkably explicit regarding the imperative of maintaining an immaculate household during their absence. Thus, at 9 in the morning on Saturday, I found myself traversing to the supermarket with the two youngsters, expending $30 from my pension on cleaning agents for a calamity that could have been rectified with mere soap and water. At the supermarket, Ethan requested the specialty cereal his father favoured, the one priced at $8 a box. Valerie desired the organic cookies her mother procured for her, those contained within the $10 package. I observed the price tags and engaged in frantic mental calculations, acutely aware that each dollar expended represented one less dollar for my own necessities. "Why are you taking so long to decide, Grandma?" Ethan inquired impatiently while I scrutinized laundry detergent options. "I am merely assessing which is superior, my dear," I fibbed, unwilling to divulge to an 8-year-old that his grandmother faced the dilemma of choosing between provisions for him or medication for herself. Upon our return home, a message from Ranada awaited me on my phone. "Mother, I trust you have procured fresh produce for the week. Upon our return on Sunday, the residence must be pristine and the larder replete. We do not wish to arrive at an unstocked dwelling following our restful respite. Fresh produce, an additional $50 unplanned for, another 2 hours of walking with the children as the taxi fare would have to be diverted to sustenance. Another afternoon of my weekend dedicated to catering, to the requirements of individuals enjoying a luxurious hotel, courtesy of the funds amassed through my gratuitous services. On Sunday afternoon, as I meticulously cleaned the residence from top to bottom in anticipation of Renata and Gustavo's triumphant return, I received a call that would fundamentally alter my circumstances. It was Lucy, my neighbour of 15 years, the sole individual privy to the intricacies of my predicament, despite my never having openly articulated it. "My dear, are you quite well? You have seemed rather peculiar of late," she expressed, her voice imbued with a warmth that evoked memories of conversations unburdened by schedules or agendas. "Yes, I am quite well," I replied automatically, folding Gustavo's garments that I had laundered and pressed over the weekend. "No, you are not well. I observe you departing with great alacrity each morning as though you are hurrying to an engagement. And I witness your return laden with grocery bags almost daily. What is transpiring within your household?" She persisted with a gentle tenacity characteristic of true companions. For a fleeting moment, the temptation to terminate the call arose. It would have been simpler to maintain the pretense of normalcy, to accept the notion that a 66-year-old woman was destined to function as a domestic servant in her own home. However, something in Lucy's tone proved my undoing. "Lucy, would you be able to visit for a brief period? I find myself in need of someone to confide in," I articulated, surprised by my own candor. "I am en route," she responded without hesitation. When Lucy arrived, the children were engrossed in their television programs in the living room, utterly absorbed. We convened in the kitchen, enveloped by the impeccable order I had established for their parents' arrival. And for the first time in many months, I divulged the unvarnished truth of my existence to another soul. I presented the schedule. I elucidated the financial intricacies. I recounted the threat of eviction from my own domicile should I decline to capitulate to their demands as their unpaid operative. I spoke of the diminutive chamber, of the familial ostracism on Sundays, of Gustavo's mother, who was poised to be attended to by me in my own bed. Lucy listened with a placid expression that transitioned from astonishment to horror, and finally to an unadulterated indignation I had not witnessed in a considerable duration. "My dear, this constitutes abuse," she declared definitively, her words striking me with the force of a clarifying revelation. "This is not ordinary. This is not how a family that cherishes you behaves. But they assert it is equitable that within a family, each member fulfills a distinct function," I began, echoing the pronouncements I had so frequently encountered. "No," she interjected with a surprising vehemence. "In a functional family, roles are deliberated and mutually assented to. No one imposes an unpaid work regimen upon another individual. No one threatens to expel another from their own abode. That is not affection, my dear. That is exploitation. The word resonated in the shared space between us. Exploitation. It was not familial discord. It was not a generational disconnect. It was not my incapacity to adapt to contemporary norms. It was unadulterated, simple. But what recourse do I possess? I inquired, feeling the unbidden emergence of tears after months of suppression. They are correct on one point. At my age, with my pension, where else would I find refuge? Who else would desire me? My dear, look at me, Lucy implored, grasping my hands. You are 66 years old, not 96. You own your residence, possess a stable pension, and to my knowledge, your cognitive faculties are entirely unimpaired. You require no one's support. It is they who are dependent upon you. It was a perspective so uncomplicated and transformative that it rendered me speechless. For so long I had operated under the assumption that I was fortunate to have shelter, that I had overlooked the fact that the dwelling was intrinsically mine. I had presumed myself to be the recipient of their benevolence when, in reality, they were the beneficiaries of mine. Furthermore, Lucy continued, do you genuinely believe this situation will improve over time? Do you surmise they will awaken one day and resolve to treat you with respect? My dear, this will only escalate. Each boundary you permit them to transgress will solidify as the new minimum standard for their treatment of you. She spoke the truth. The schedule had not materialized instantaneously. It was the culmination of 2 years of incremental erosion of my dignity, of minor concessions that had morphed into expectations, of courtesies that had transmuted into obligations. What course of action would you adopt in my stead? I posed, though the underlying question was whether I possessed the fortitude to implement what I knew to be the correct path. I would escort them from my residence tomorrow, she declared without a moment's hesitation. And if you lack the courage for that immediate step, at the very least, commence establishing boundaries, stipulating remuneration for your services, demanding deference within your own home, and unequivocally reminding them of who truly possesses dominion over all of this. We detected the sound of an approaching vehicle. Renata and Gustavo had returned from their romantic retreat, exhibiting a sun-tanned and relaxed demeanor, poised to resume the routine wherein I served as their personal attendant, and they my benevolent employers. My dear, Lucy conveyed to me before her departure, should you require discourse, assistance, or simply someone to reaffirm your inherent worthiness of dignified treatment, do not hesitate to contact me at any hour. And contemplate this. If a domestic worker labored the hours you do and was compelled to remunerate for the privilege of employment, how long, pray tell, do you surmise they would persist in such a role? The question haunted me as Ranada and Gustavo entered the house, their gaze critically appraising whether I had met all their stipulations during their absence. It persisted as they lamented the absence of milk in the refrigerator and the insufficiency of new towels for Gustavo's mother's impending visit. That night, nestled in my bed, which would soon cease to be my own, I began to contemplate, for the first time in a considerable period, what might transpire if I were to simply utter a negative response. Monday morning dawned like a perfect confluence of indignities. At 5:30 in the morning, the insistent chime of the doorbell roused me from slumber. It was Marisa, Gustavo's mother, standing at my threshold, accompanied by 2 prodigious suitcases and an expression befitting royalty awaiting their grand reception. Finally, she proclaimed without offering a greeting, propelling her luggage into the house. The taxi was agonizingly slow. I trust Gustavo apprised you of my specific breakfast requirements. My digestive system is quite delicate and cannot tolerate just any fare. It was 5:45 in the morning. I had scarcely had the opportunity to attend to my personal grooming, yet here I was receiving directives regarding the particular dietary needs of a woman who had seemingly invited herself for an indefinite stay. "Good morning, Marissa," I managed to articulate, though my voice sounded hoarse from the interrupted sleep. "Gustavo informed me of your arrival. But yes, it is beneficial that all arrangements are in order," she interrupted, her gaze sweeping critically across my home. "Although I perceive this dwelling requires some adjustments. Where is my chamber? I am profoundly fatigued from my journey." My chamber, the master suite that had already been commandeered from me, and which would now serve as her domain during her indeterminate residency. I guided her down the corridor, bearing one of her suitcases that felt as though it contained lead weights, while she offered commentary on every aspect of my decor that displeased her. "This rug appears quite threadbare," she remarked, gesturing towards the Persian rug that had been a source of pride for me for years. "And these draperies are excessively somber. At my age, I require ample natural illumination. You will need to replace them tomorrow." Replace the draperies with my own funds, naturally, to enhance the comfort of my own chamber for an uninvited guest with no discernible departure date. Upon reaching the master suite, Marissa inspected its contents as a general reviewing his troops. She opened and closed drawers. She assessed the mattress by applying varying degrees of pressure while seated upon it, ultimately declaring, "This will suffice, although I must insist that you launder all linens with a hypoallergenic detergent. I cannot abide sleeping in unblemished beds." Hypoallergenic detergent, another unforeseen expenditure, another cost that would be deducted from my already strained pension. Precisely at 6, as Gustavo had assured, Marissa materialized in the kitchen, anticipating her specially prepared breakfast. She was attired in a silken nightgown and feathered slippers, presenting an appearance more befitting the proprietor of a luxury establishment than a guest in my abode. I require 2 fried eggs, but exceedingly dry, devoid of oil, whole wheat toast, but lightly browned, not burnt, very weak coffee akin to tea and fresh fruit, but exclusively the perfectly ripened specimens. She recited her demands as though presenting a menu I was expected to have memorized. I possessed no eggs, I had no whole wheat bread, I had no fresh fruit, having allocated all my funds over the weekend to the children's indulgences and the cleaning supplies necessary to maintain the household's pristine condition for Ranada and Gustavo's return. "Marissa, I do not have precisely what you are requesting, but I can prepare something comparable," I began to explain. "What do you mean you do not have any?" she interrupted, her indignation permeating the entire kitchen. "Gustavo did not inform you of my requirements. This is utterly unacceptable, a residence lacking the fundamental provisions for a decent breakfast." At that precise juncture, Gustavo entered the kitchen, already attired for his workday, a vexed expression clouding his features, a manifestation of his displeasure when anything disrupted his meticulously organized routine. "What is transpiring here? Why all this clamor so early?" he inquired, despite it being his mother who had been vociferating. "Your housekeeper is devoid of sustenance in the pantry," Marissa retorted, indicating me as if I were a defective appliance. "How am I to partake in breakfast without the essential provisions?" Housekeeper. She had not even bothered to feign that I was anything beyond that designation. To her, I was simply the service staff within her son's residence, engaged to cater to her needs without question. "My dear, did you not visit the market this past weekend?" Gustavo inquired of me, his tone laced with a reproach he had perfected to instill in me the sensation of a chastised child. "Yes, I did. However, I expended the funds as per Ranada's stipulations for the children." I commenced my explanation. "Oh, spare me," he interrupted. You invariably present justifications. My mother requires a proper breakfast. Proceed to the market forthwith and procure the necessary items, and in the future, exercise better planning. Go to the market at 7 in the morning. Proceed to the market at 7 in the morning, expending additional funds I did not possess to appease a woman who treated me with utter disdain within my own dwelling. All the while, Gustavo prepared to depart for his daily 3-hour work commitment, and Ranada continued her peaceful slumber in the children's quarters. And with what financial resources? I inquired, detecting a hardening sensation within me. I have already exhausted all available funds for this month. With your pension funds, evidently, Gustavo responded as if my question were the height of absurdity. That is precisely why you receive an income, is it not? To ensure the household operates smoothly. My pension has already been allocated for this month, I stated with a firmness that surprised even myself. I have no further financial means available for unforeseen expenditures. The ensuing silence was so profound it could be severed with a blade. Gustavo regarded me as though I had uttered a blasphemy, and Marissa wore an expression akin to someone who had just witnessed the most incomprehensible act of defiance imaginable. Are you conveying that you are incapable of procuring sustenance for my mother? Gustavo demanded, his voice escalating with an indignation that would have bordered on comical had it not been so utterly callous. I am stating that I currently lack available funds, I reiterated, striving to maintain a semblance of calm in my tone. This is preposterous, Marissa exclaimed, addressing her son as though I were not present. This is the caliber of service the family receives within this residence, an employee who refuses to undertake essential provisioning. My dear, this situation is unsustainable, Gustavo declared, adopting a cadence he might employ to reprimand a recalcitrant employee. If you are unable to fulfill the fundamental responsibilities of maintaining this household, then perhaps we ought to reassess our living arrangements. There it was again, the veiled yet unmistakable threat. Do you comply with our demands, or do you vacate your own home? Do you serve our family without reservation, or do you forfeit your right to reside in the very place you procured and financed? At that moment, Ranada emerged into the kitchen, still clad in her night attire, yet fully alert due to the commotion of the dispute. Her presence instantaneously altered the conversational dynamic, as if a supervisor had arrived to arbitrate a labor disagreement. "What is the source of this disturbance?" she inquired, though it was evident she had been privy to the proceedings from the hallway. "Your mother is refusing to go to the market to procure breakfast for my mother," Gustavo explained to her as if reporting a child's transgression. "Mother?" Ranada addressed me, her voice tinged with a disappointment she had honed since adolescence. "Is it true that you are unwilling to purchase food for Grandmother Marissa?" The manipulation was masterfully executed. They had artfully transmuted my resistance to expending funds I did not possess into a heartless refusal to nourish a needy elderly woman. They had reframed my endeavor to establish basic financial boundaries as an inexcusable act of selfishness. "It is not that I am unwilling," I countered, feeling myself compelled to defend against accusations I should not be obligated to refute. "It is that I have already expended all my financial resources for this month, and I have no remaining budget for supplementary purchases." "Oh, Mother, always exaggerating about finances," Ranada sighed dramatically. "How much could breakfast possibly cost? $10, $15. Do not tell me you lack even a single dollar to provide for your family." $15 that would escalate to $30 the following day, $45 the day after. A continuous depletion of my pension to ensure the comfort of a woman who openly disdained me. "Furthermore," Gustavo added, "my mother will not be a permanent resident. This is merely a temporary arrangement while she adjusts to her solitude. Can you not undertake this minor sacrifice for the family?" Temporary. That same phrase they'd employed upon their arrival 2 years prior, intending a brief sojourn of mere months. The same hollow assurance they'd consistently offered to sanction every intrusion into my personal space, every escalating imposition on my time, every deepening deficit in my finances. "And how long will Marissa be staying?" I inquired, already bracing myself for an unwelcome response. "We're not precisely certain," Gustavo responded, his tone evasive. "It hinges on her well-being, whether she discovers enjoyable pursuits in the vicinity, and how readily she acclimates to the household's rhythm." The household's rhythm? I scoffed internally, recognizing it as my ingrained pattern of catering, tidying, preparing meals, and then bearing the financial burden of it all. The very routine where I served as the unpaid domestic staff for a family who had presumptuously deemed my residence their own by entitlement. In that precise moment, standing in my own kitchen, being chastised for my reluctance to fund a woman's capricious desires who treated me with utter disdain, something irrevocably fractured within me. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic revelation. It was more akin to a dam succumbing to pressure, a hairline fracture initially, then a persistent seep, culminating in an irrepressible torrent of clarity. "Very well," I announced, my composure surprising even myself. "I shall proceed to the market and procure whatever Marissa requires for her morning meal." A collective sigh of relief seemed to emanate from them, as if my capitulation had somehow restored cosmic equilibrium, reinstating my expected subservience. Yet there was a subtle alteration in my vocal inflection, an undertone none of them perceived, as they were far too accustomed to assuming my unwavering compliance. "Perfect, mother," Ranita declared, accompanied by that patronizing smirk she reserved for moments she deemed my return to reason. "I knew you would ultimately grasp the paramount importance of making Grandmother Marissa feel embraced." I swiftly donned my coat and departed for the grocery store. This time, however, my destination wasn't the produce aisle. My initial stop was the pharmacy situated within the shopping complex, knowing it housed an ATM, not to retrieve funds for Marissa's breakfast, but for an entirely different purpose. I withdrew $200 from my personal savings, funds meticulously set aside for unforeseen exigencies. Yet I now recognized this as the ultimate crisis, the urgent necessity of reclaiming my self-respect before the window of opportunity closed permanently. With the currency secured in my wallet, I made my way to a law firm whose advertisement had caught my eye in the local gazette. It was early, barely 8:30 in the morning, but the receptionist informed me that attorney David Miller accommodated urgent consultations from 9 o'clock. "Is it an emergency?" the receptionist, a young woman with a gentle smile, inquired. "Yes," I affirmed without hesitation. "I believe it is." David Miller proved to be a gentleman in his 50s, distinguished by a meticulously trimmed beard and eyes that radiated a depth of experience gleaned from navigating countless intricate family disputes. "Please tell me what is transpiring, Mrs. Everett," he initiated, consulting the card upon which I had inscribed my name. Mrs. Everett, the utterance of my married surname resonated differently this time, imbued with a sense of pride I hadn't felt in ages. "Attorney, I require counsel regarding my proprietary rights within my own domicile." I detailed the entire predicament, the incessant demands on my labor, the veiled threats of dispossession from my own property, the pervasive financial exploitation, and Marissa's uninvited presence. For 20 minutes the words flowed without pause, much like the breached dam releasing its pent-up pressure. David listened intently, interjecting occasional notes, and responding with nods that conveyed a spectrum of emotions, from surprise to palpable indignation. Upon my concluding remarks, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze a blend of empathy and professional resolve. "Mrs. Everett," he stated with a clarity that struck me with the force of a lightning bolt, "what you have described constitutes financial and emotional abuse. Your daughter and son-in-law are engaging in what is legally recognized as elder exploitation. But do they possess any claim to rights due to their residency of 2 years?" I queried, recalling Gustavo's prior pronouncements about legal recourse. "In certain circumstances, following a stipulated duration, occupants may assert tenancy rights," he elaborated. "However, these rights never extend to exploiting the property owner, imposing unpaid labor obligations, nor certainly to introducing additional individuals without the owner's express consent." A profound sense of relief washed over me, as if an immense weight had been lifted. For the first time in months, an external validation confirmed my perception of reality. I was neither exaggerating nor ungrateful. "What steps can I take?" I asked, my voice resonating with hope rather than the desperation that had become my constant companion. "Several avenues are available," he responded, reviewing his notes. "Firstly, you can formally notify them in writing of the termination of any informal living arrangement. Secondly, you can establish unambiguous boundaries concerning the utilization of your property and your financial resources. Thirdly, you may formally request that unauthorized occupants vacate the premises immediately." "And what if they refuse?" I pressed, envisioning my family's inevitable resistance to such pronouncements. "Then we have several legal options at our disposal, including eviction proceedings and official reports of elder abuse. However, my experience suggests that once families ascertain that the elderly individual is legally represented and fully cognizant of their rights, their behavior tends to undergo a rapid and significant shift." David explained his capacity to draft a legal correspondence that very same day, outlining revised terms for any who wished to continue residing in my abode. These terms would encompass the payment of market rate rent, equitable contribution to household expenditures, and unwavering deference to my authority as the rightful owner. "What is the cost of this type of consultation?" I inquired, apprehensive about exceeding my financial capabilities. "For cases involving elder abuse, we offer specialized rates," he assured me with a reassuring smile. $100 for the initial consultation and $200 for the preparation of the requisite legal notices. Should the matter escalate to litigation, we can discuss a payment arrangement. $300, a sum equivalent to my expenses for 2 weeks of maintaining my family, or what Renata and Gustavo had squandered on a single romantic getaway. It felt, for the first time in a considerable period, like an investment of exceptional value. "Attorney Miller, I wish for you to prepare those letters today," I declared, withdrawing the necessary funds from my wallet with hands that no longer trembled. "An excellent decision, Mrs. Everett. These documents will be finalized this afternoon. Would you prefer that I personally deliver them to your family, or would you rather handle the delivery yourself?" "Myself," I replied without a moment's hesitation. "I believe it is time for a frank discussion with my family." Upon departing the attorney's office, I felt profoundly transformed. It wasn't an overnight restoration of absolute confidence, but rather the possession of a concrete plan. I had acquired professional backing. I possessed legal protections that could not be undermined by intimidation or emotional coercion. However, before returning to my residence, I made one final stop. I proceeded to the bank and conferred with the branch manager regarding the modification of my account access protocols and the imposition of stringent limitations on any third-party transactions. "Have you encountered issues with unauthorized access to your accounts?" The manager, an efficient woman who seemed to grasp the situation implicitly, inquired. "Let us simply say I wish to ensure that only I have control over my financial affairs henceforth," I responded. A most prudent measure, she commented, initiating the account adjustments. Would you also like to review the authorization status for your credit cards? An excellent suggestion. Ranata had been utilizing my credit card for months, ostensibly for emergent needs that were consistently left unreimbursed. It was time for those so-called emergencies to become their own fiscal responsibility. I wish to revoke all supplementary authorizations, I stated firmly. Exclusive access to my accounts and cards will henceforth reside with me. My eventual return home occurred nearly at 11 o'clock in the morning. 4 hours had elapsed since my purported departure for Marissa's breakfast provisions, and I was returning empty-handed, yet armed with something infinitely more valuable, an actionable strategy and the legal framework to implement it. Gustavo had already departed for his workday, but Ranita and Marissa occupied the living room, their expressions betraying their evident irritation at my prolonged absence. The children were at their respective educational institutions, ensuring a degree of privacy for the forthcoming conversation I intended to initiate. At last, Marissa exclaimed as I entered, "Where have you been? It's nearly 11 and I haven't consumed a single bite." "And where is the food?" Renata questioned, observing my lack of grocery bags. "We need to have a discussion," I stated, maintaining a tone that was both calm and resolute, all three of us without delay. Something in my demeanor must have served as a silent alarm, as both fell silent, regarding me with a mixture of surprise and apprehension that had been absent for a considerable duration. "Be seated," I instructed, gesturing towards the sofa. "This conversation will precipitate significant changes within this household. I have been consulting with a legal professional," I began, observing their visages shift from annoyance to outright alarm within mere seconds. "And I have gleaned some remarkably insightful details regarding my rights as the proprietor of this dwelling." The ensuing silence was profound. Ranita's gaze mirrored the look she'd worn as a child, caught in an act of mischief she knew was impermissible. Marissa, meanwhile, appeared genuinely bewildered, as if incapable of comprehending why a domestic employee would seek legal counsel. "Mother, what are you doing?" Ranita inquired, her voice attempting a veneer of concern that failed to mask the underlying panic. "Why did you consult an attorney without informing us?" "Because I wished to ascertain, with absolute clarity, my legal standing within my own home," I replied, my voice maintaining its serene cadence. "And it transpires that this standing is considerably divergent from the narrative you have orchestrated." I produced the documents David had meticulously prepared with extraordinary promptness. 3 letters bearing official letterhead, addressed individually to Renata, Gustavo, and Marissa. The palpable weight of the paper in my hands felt akin to the tangible restoration of my own dignity. "These are legal notifications," I continued, placing the documents on the coffee table. "You may peruse them now, or you may await my formal presentation this afternoon. However, their content remains unchanged." Ranita promptly stood and retrieved her correspondence, her eyes scanning the text with a haste that betrayed her desperate need to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Marissa accepted hers with trembling hands, while I observed her accustomed air of superiority gradually dissolve into sheer astonishment. "This is utterly preposterous," Ranita declared after barely skimming the initial page. "You cannot expel us from the house. We are your family." "I am not expelling you," I countered, my calm a surprising companion. "I am extending an invitation to remain under revised stipulations that are equitable and legally sound." Ranita's letter explicitly delineated the new parameters. Should she wish to continue residing in my domicile, she would be obligated to remit $800 monthly as rent, contribute an equal share to all household expenses, and demonstrate absolute respect for my authority as the owner and my right to privacy within my personal quarters. $800, she shrieked, brandishing the document as if it were a cruel jest. Mother, you are aware we lack the financial capacity for such an amount. Then perhaps it is time you pursued gainful employment, I rejoined, adopting the very condescending tone she had honed for addressing me. Or perhaps it is time you sought accommodations within your financial means, supported by your own income. Marissa, having concluded her perusal of her own notification, regarded me as if I had completely lost my faculties. Her directive was more succinct. She was granted 48 hours to vacate the premises, her presence having been explicitly unauthorized by the owner. You cannot possibly do this, she stammered, her voice faltering with indignant disbelief. I am an elderly woman. You cannot cast me out onto the streets like a criminal. I am not casting you out onto the streets, I affirmed with unwavering resolve. I am requesting that you return to your own residence or secure lodging elsewhere, in a location where you are an invited guest, not an imposed burden. Gustavo will not stand for this, she threatened, rising from the sofa with more animation than she had exhibited since her arrival. He will protect his mother. Gustavo can protect his mother within your home, I stated, indicating the exit. This is my home and my directives are paramount here. Ranita remained silent, rereading her letter as if anticipating a magical alteration of its text. When her gaze finally lifted, tears welled in her eyes, though they were not tears of genuine sorrow. They were the calculated tears she had employed since childhood to manipulate situations to her advantage. Mother, how could you do this to us? She whimpered, her voice attempting a devastated timbre. We love you. We simply desired a united family, and this is how you repay us. You threaten us with legal action. A united family does not enforce work schedules upon one of its members, I rejoined, standing firm against her theatrical display. A united family does not menace its members with eviction from their own abode should they decline to function as unpaid domestic labourers. We never threatened to evict you, she protested, despite the undeniable truth that such had been their implicit intention. Renata, I stated, producing the crumpled schedule from my handbag. I possess the document you presented to me. At the conclusion, it explicitly states that if I do not concur with these conditions, you understand my preference to seek alternative accommodations. What would you classify that as? She faltered momentarily, clearly searching for a means to reframe her own written decree. Ultimately, she opted for a strategic shift. All right, perhaps we were unduly stringent with the schedule, she conceded, adopting a conciliatory tone. We can amend that. We can exhibit greater flexibility. You needn't involve legal professionals to resolve family matters. The issue extends beyond the schedule, Renata, I asserted, feeling emboldened with each uttered word. The problem lies in your transformation of me into your unpaid housekeeper. The problem lies in your profligate spending of my pension as though it were your own. The problem lies in your invitation of guests into my home without my consent and your subsequent expectation that I attend to them. Marissa, who had been observing our exchange with escalating agitation, finally erupted. This is madness. Gustavo assured me he lived with a loving family. He never mentioned he would reside with a deranged elderly woman who perceives her home as a hotel. Precisely, I replied, meeting her gaze directly. This is not a hotel. This is my home, and within my home, guests are invited, not imposed. But I am Gustavo's mother, she exclaimed, as if this conferred automatic dominion over my property. And I am the owner of this house, I retorted with a vehemence I hadn't known I possessed. Your familial connection to Gustavo grants you no jurisdiction over my residence. Renata had been silently engaged in calculations, likely assessing the actual financial implications of independent living for them. When she resumed speaking, her voice carried a desperate undertone I had never before encountered. "Mother, let us be pragmatic," she implored, striving for a semblance of rationality. "We cannot possibly afford $800 in rent plus household expenses. You are aware of this, and you cannot live alone at your age either. We are interdependent." "I have resided independently previously," I stated. "I lived alone for 10 years following your father's passing, before your arrival. And I managed quite well, I might add." "But you are older now," she insisted, deploying the age card as a final resort. "What if you fall ill? What provision is there if you require assistance?" "I will engage professional assistance should the need arise," I responded, an idea that had just surfaced yet seemed entirely plausible. There exist numerous senior services that provide paid assistance, treating individuals with respect and professionalism. "Are you suggesting you would remunerate strangers instead of accepting aid from your own family?" she inquired, as if the notion were a personal affront. "I am choosing to compensate for professional services rather than be exploited by individuals who capitalize on my affection," I corrected. "There exists a significant distinction." At that precise moment, the telephone rang. It was Gustavo, presumably calling to verify that his mother had received adequate attention in his absence. Ranita hastened to answer, her voice a hurried whisper that clearly conveyed the unfolding family crisis. While she conversed, Marissa approached me, her expression having transmuted from indignant outrage to a semblance of respect. It marked the first instance she had regarded me as a sentient being rather than a piece of animated furniture. "My dear," she began, her voice noticeably softer, "perhaps we can reach some accommodation. I do not require the master suite. Might I occupy the sofa?" "Oh, Marissa," I interrupted gently, "the crux of the matter is not the sleeping arrangements. The fundamental issue is your arrival at my home without invitation, with the expectation of perpetual guest status. This arrangement is inequitable for us both." Gustavo arrived home approximately 20 minutes after Renata's call, his countenance displaying an expression entirely unfamiliar to me. It lacked its customary condescending arrogance. It was a far more ominous manifestation, the visage of a man confronting the imminent collapse of his parasitic existence. "My dear, we need to converse," he stated, his voice tightly controlled, a charade that fooled me not in the slightest. "Renata has informed me of these ludicrous missives you procured from some disreputable legal adviser." "Attorney David Miller is not disreputable," I replied calmly. "He is an attorney specializing in landlord-tenant law and elder protection, and these letters are not ludicrous. They are legally sound notifications." "This constitutes a betrayal," he bellowed, abandoning all pretense of diplomacy. "After all we have done for you, after providing companionship to prevent your solitude, after infusing this once empty dwelling with life and vibrancy." The sheer distortion of reality was so extreme it nearly elicited a laugh. According to their narrative, they had, in fact, been doing me a favor by residing in my house rent-free, consuming my provisions, utilizing my utilities, and depleting my funds. "Gustavo, you are 42 years of age," I stated, my patience teetering on the edge. "If you desire a home brimming with life, you possess the means to acquire your own dwelling and populate it with all the vibrancy you deem appropriate, but not at my expense. We have been diligently saving to purchase our own residence," he shouted, as if this justified 2 years of systematic exploitation. "But it is an insurmountable task to save when confronted with such substantial expenditures. You cannot comprehend the financial burden of raising 2 children." "You are correct," I conceded, his surprise palpable. "I do not comprehend the financial burden of raising 2 children. For when I raised Renata, I bore all her expenses from my own earnings. I did not seek out an elder to financially sustain me. Marissa, who had been observing the escalating confrontation from her sofa perch, elected to interject her perspective on maternal support. My dear, I comprehend your confusion, but Gustavo is a commendable father and an exemplary son. He does not merit such treatment from an individual of your advanced years who is demonstrably experiencing a decline in mental acuity. Experiencing a decline in mental acuity? I repeated, a surge of fury igniting within my chest. For asserting my rights within my own domicile, for threatening my family with legal recourse instead of resolving issues as civilized adults? Civilized adults do not impose work schedules on family members, I countered. Civilized adults do not threaten to evict the proprietor of their own residence. Gustavo had been pacing the living room with agitated strides, clearly engaged in a strategic assessment of his available options. He halted, a glint in his eye that signaled the deployment of his most formidable gambit. Very well, my dear, he stated, a smile that failed to reach his eyes gracing his lips. If you wish to engage in legal skirmishes, we too can participate, for it transpires that we have also been seeking counsel regarding our rights. What rights? I inquired, already anticipating the direction of his pronouncements. The rights of tenants who have occupied a property for a duration exceeding 2 years, he declared triumphantly. The rights of parents who have nurtured their offspring within a stable home environment. The rights of a family unit that has diligently maintained a property that was, in fact, deteriorating due to a lack of necessary care. It was precisely the threat David had forewarned me they might employ. The crucial difference now was that I was adequately prepared to confront it. Gustavo, I stated, my voice exuding a calm that clearly unsettled him, I suggest you present those legal documents to your actual attorney. My own legal counsel assured me that no court in this nation would recognize any tenant rights for individuals who have failed to remit rent and have been financially preying upon the property owner. Gustavo's countenance shifted instantly. It was evident his supposed illegal consultations were merely internet searches or informal chats with acquaintances, not legitimate professional advice. Furthermore, I continued, revealing my trump card, my lawyer informed me that your conduct is classified as elder exploitation, a federal offense. Therefore, if you wish to involve more legal professionals in this predicament, feel free. However, I must caution you that the legal repercussions for you will far outweigh any for me. The ensuing silence was profound. Even the children who had arrived home from school during our exchange and were observing from the hallway remained utterly still. Are you threatening to take legal action against us? Ranata inquired, her voice reequaging a childish tone she hadn't employed since adolescence. I am not threatening you with anything, I responded. I am merely outlining the legal ramifications of your actions, precisely as my attorney explained to me this morning. Ethan appeared at the entrance to the living room, his school backpack still slung over his shoulders, his expression one of bewilderment. Why is everyone shouting, and why is Grandma crying? Indeed, Marissa had begun to weep, though her tears were not of sorrow. They were born of fury and humiliation, the reaction of someone realizing they had completely lost command of a situation they had believed to be entirely under their control. It's all right, my dear, I assured Ethan, approaching to embrace him. The adults are having an important discussion about how we will all reside in this house. Are we leaving the house? Valerie inquired, her eyes wide as she materialized behind her brother. My granddaughter's innocent question pierced my heart. Yet it also reinforced the profound reasons behind my actions. These children deserve to mature in an environment where familial bonds are forged through love and mutual esteem, not exploitation and manipulation. That depends entirely on your parents, I replied truthfully. If they elect to remain here, adhering to the household regulations and contributing equitably, they are welcome to stay. Otherwise, they will need to secure alternative accommodation. What regulations? Ethan asked, his innate childlike curiosity prompting the question. Rules such as all adults residing here must be gainfully employed and contribute to household expenses. I elaborated. Rules dictating that no one may coerce other family members into labor without respite. Rules affirming that we all merit respectful treatment. Gustavo regarded me with an expression that, a week prior, might have intimidated me. Now, it merely appeared pitiable. My dear, are you truly involving the children in these adult predicaments? The children were already bewildered, I countered. They were confused by their grandmother being treated as domestic staff. They were confused by their parents discussing her eviction from her own home. Now, at least, they are being informed that an alternative exists for family coexistence. Ranata approached her children and enfolded them in an embrace that, while seemingly affectionate, was clearly intended to elicit sympathy. Children, please go to your rooms and complete your homework. The adults need to conclude their conversation. Once the children had departed, the atmosphere in the living room grew even more charged. It felt as though we were all anticipating a decisive move in a game of chess where the fundamental rules had been irrevocably altered. Very well, Gustavo finally conceded, adopting a conciliatory tone. Let us assume you are earnest in all of this. Let us assume you genuinely expect us to pay rent and contribute to expenses. What time frame are you affording us to make the necessary arrangements? The correspondence specifies 30 days, I replied, referring to the documents. 30 days to determine if you accept the new terms and commence adherence, or 30 days to vacate the premises. And my mother? He inquired, gesturing towards Marissa, who was still dallying on the sofa. Your mother has 48 hours, I stated with unwavering firmness. She has no residential agreement with me, sanctioned or otherwise. Her presence here was an imposition, not an invitation. You cannot evict an elderly woman with only 2 days' notice, Gustavo protested. I can and I will, I responded, surprised by my own steadfastness. Your mother possesses her own residence. If she prefers not to reside alone, she may find suitable accommodations for individuals of her age, or she may reside with relatives who have genuinely extended an invitation. 3 months later, I awoke in my own bed, in my own room, at 7 in the morning by choice, not by imposition. The quietude of the house did not disturb me. In fact, it was the most exquisite sound I had experienced in years, the sound of serenity. Marissa had departed on the second day, precisely as the legal notification had mandated. Her exit was accompanied by theatrical tears and pronouncements of eternal estrangement, as if such a severance represented a loss rather than a liberation. Gustavo was compelled to solicit financial assistance from his siblings to secure temporary lodging, while Marissa contemplated her next course of action. Ultimately, she elected to relocate to a senior living facility, where, I later learned, she perpetually lamented the staff's alleged lack of efficiency compared to my own. Ranata and Gustavo employed a spectrum of stratagems during those initial 30 days. Their first approach was outright denial, insisting that the entire affair was a misunderstanding, a family matter they could resolve without external legal intervention. When this tactic proved ineffective, they resorted to emotional manipulation, constantly reminding me of the supposed forfeiture of witnessing my grandchildren's formative years, as if such observation necessitated my functioning as their unpaid 24-hour caretaker. This was succeeded by an outburst of anger. Gustavo subjected me to 2 hours of yelling one evening, labeling me selfish, cruel, a negligent mother, and an even worse grandmother. Renata alternated between tears, pleading, embraces, and even involving the children in appeals for me to reconsider. However, for the first time in years, I maintained my position. David had meticulously prepared me for each of these maneuvers, equipping me with calm, legally sound rebuttals to their emotional onslaughts. The children will suffer because of your actions, Ranata had declared during one of her final attempts at coercion. The children will learn that healthy family dynamics are predicated on mutual respect, not exploitation, I had replied, employing the precise phrasing David had suggested. The concluding phase proved most illuminating. During the final week before their departure, both Renata and Gustavo began to exhibit an exaggerated courtesy, a saccharine deference that was almost more offensive than their prior transgressions. Suddenly, I was addressed as Mrs. Everett, accompanied by profuse pleases and thank yous for everything. It was as if they had suddenly recalled the existence of basic politeness, but only when it served their immediate needs. Mum, we truly hope you comprehend that we have always cherished you, Ranata had stated on the morning of their departure. It's simply that families occasionally encounter disagreements. Disagreements. 2 years of systematic exploitation distilled into a mere misunderstanding, as if it had been a minor confusion over chore distribution, rather than a deliberate campaign to relegate me to the status of their unpaid domestic servant. Yet they were gone. They relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment on the opposite side of town, a residence incurring precisely $800 per month in rent and associated expenses. Apparently, when confronted with the obligation of remunerating an unfamiliar landlord, funds were readily available. It was only when compelled to settle accounts with me, their own family, that their financial resources became inexplicably insufficient. The initial days following their departure were peculiar. The house felt cavernously vacant after 2 years of being saturated with incessant clamour, urgent demands, and the perpetual strain of catering to others' needs. However, this sensation of emptiness gradually transmuted into something entirely different. Liberation. I could partake in breakfast at my leisure. I could indulge in televised programs of my choosing. I could prepare meals based on my own culinary desires rather than the dietary specifications of 4 disparate individuals. I could allocate my pension towards my own requirements and even permit myself modest indulgences I had nearly forgotten existed. The first instance I purchased fresh flowers for my dining room table, I found myself weeping in the supermarket aisle. Those $15 would have previously been earmarked for specialized cereals or hypoallergenic shampoo for uninvited guests. Now, they represented $15 I could allocate to something that brought me personal joy purely for the satisfaction of self-gratification. Lucy had been an invaluable source of support throughout the entire ordeal. Not only had she fortified my resolve during the most challenging junctures, but she had evolved into a genuine confidant. We now shared lunch twice weekly, frequented the farmers' market on Saturday mornings, and had embarked on watercolor painting classes at the community center. "Don't you miss the children's noise?" she had inquired one afternoon as we painted serene watercolor landscapes. "I miss my grandchildren," I had responded with candor. "But I do not miss functioning as their unpaid sitter. There is a significant distinction." And it was undeniably true. Ethan and Valerie visit me every other Saturday, an arrangement we established after numerous contentious negotiations. Initially, Renata attempted to leverage these visits as a means of exerting pressure, suggesting that any failure on my part to concede on specific aspects of the separation agreement could complicate the coordination of these visits. David had advised me to conduct all correspondence regarding visitation exclusively in writing, and through him, until Ranata recognized the futility of employing her own children as instruments of emotional blackmail. Eventually, we arrived at a civilized accord. The children visit every other Saturday, from 10 in the morning until 6 in the evening, and I engage them in enjoyable activities that my current financial circumstances permit, now that I am no longer subsidizing the extravagant lifestyles of 4 adults. The transformation in my relationship with Ethan and Valerie has been remarkable. When I am not burdened with their round-the-clock care, when I am not preoccupied with their meal times, their disciplinary protocols, and their ceaseless entertainment, I can simply be their grandmother. I can indulge them slightly, share laughter with them, and listen to their accounts of school life without the incessant distraction of contemplating the next household chore. "Grandma, why don't you live with us anymore?" Valerie had inquired during one of her initial visits. "Because adults require their own personal space to achieve happiness," I had explained. "Your mother and father need their own dwelling, where they can independently make decisions, and I require my own home where I can likewise formulate mine." "But you still love us, don't you?" she had persisted, her genuine concern capable of breaking my heart. "I love you more than anything in this world," I had assured her, embracing her tightly. "And precisely because my love for you is so profound, I wish for you to understand that individuals who cherish one another demonstrate it through mutual respect and affection. They do not exploit one another." Ethan, being older and more perceptive, had grasped the situation with surprising maturity. "Mom and Dad made you work a lot, didn't they, Grandma?" "Yes, my dear," I had admitted, "but now we are all learning more constructive ways to function as a family." That morning, 3 months subsequent to the significant shift, I awoke with a sensation I had entirely forgotten: positive anticipation, not anxiety regarding the potential demands the day might present, but genuine curiosity about the enjoyable pursuits I might elect to engage in. David had contacted me the preceding week to apprise me that Ranata and Gustavo had formally rescinded all legal claims to my property. Evidently, their consultations with actual legal professionals had corroborated what I already knew. They possessed no legal standing concerning my residence, and any attempt to assert such claims would inevitably result in accusations of elder exploitation. "How does freedom feel, Mrs. Everett?" David had inquired, his tone imbued with the warmth I had grown to deeply appreciate. "It feels like awakening from an exceedingly lengthy and oppressive nightmare," I had responded. "It feels like remembering that I am an individual, not an inanimate possession." That morning I arose at my preferred hour, partook in breakfast of my choosing, and dressed for my newly discovered favorite activity: senior dance classes at the community center. At 66 years of age, I was acquiring the art of the salsa. I had forged new friendships and was rediscovering facets of my identity I had previously overlooked. As I prepared to depart, I met my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman gazing back no longer bore the perpetually weary and anxious expression she had maintained for the past 2 years. Her eyes sparkled, her posture was erect, and she possessed something she had lost without consciously realizing it: dignity. As I exited the residence, I secured the door and proceeded to the bus stop with resolute steps. This was my home, my life, my decision. And for the first time in a considerable duration, these declarations did not instill fear. They filled me with an immense sense of pride, for I had assimilated life's most crucial lesson. It is never too late to reclaim one's self-respect. And once reclaimed, it becomes an unassailable shield against external encroachment. Regardless of the depth of one's affection or the reciprocation thereof, genuine love, I discovered, never necessitates the sacrifice of one's dignity, and authentic familial bonds never demand that one diminish their own essence to elevate another's. If you found my narrative resonant, Your support through a super thanks would enable me to continue crafting similar stories. My sincere gratitude in advance. What would be your course of action in this individual's position? I am exceptionally keen to learn your perspectives, so please share them in the comments section. I am perpetually intrigued by your insights. Additionally, kindly inform me where you encountered this story. Should you desire to experience more life narratives akin to this one, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. A multitude of further stories await you. Warmest regards, and until our next encounter.